Welcome to the Marc Steiner Show here on The Real News. I'm Marc Steiner. It's great to have you all with us. And we've been covering the rise of the right for some months now. What's clear is that their power is rising, and we can see it throughout the country in a number of states. But we can also see the resistance to it, and the movements building to oppose it and stop it and build a different America, one that was fought for by the unions in the 1930s, the civil rights movements in the South, so all the struggles for a more equitable country. Now, Florida is one of those states at ground zero, where a blatant authoritarian right-wing governor is in power and passing draconian legislation and regulations, banning books. Yes, I said banning books, not allowing the teaching of gender rights, racism, the struggle for equality, threatening teachers with being fired, and on top of that, passing laws to diminish the power of public sector unions, workers in his own home state of Florida. And we can also talk about blatant voter suppression. Well, I can go on, but I won't, because I want to begin our discussion with two women, two leaders of the battle for democracy, civil and human rights in Florida. Florida State Representative Anna Eskamani, who, as she says, is the daughter of working-class immigrants from Iran and a Democratic representative in the Florida legislature. And Nailah Summers-Polite, co-executive director of Dream Defenders Florida, which is on the front lines of the struggle in Florida, organizing to keep democracy alive. And welcome. Good to have you both with us.
Thanks for having us. Great to be with you too.
Well, it's good to have you both. I know that we're on a little tight schedule. I know you have to run off and legislate here shortly, Anna. So let's just jump into it. I want to start with kind of a background, why the struggle is so intense in Florida and what is happening and how somebody like the governor, DeSantis, is in power and what that really means, how you feel that threat. And Nailah, I'll start with you, and then and Anna jump right in.
Well, I think, Ron DeSantis got into office the first time by the skin of his teeth and didn't really reflect where the state was at in 2018 around his first election. In 2018, we saw the state vote with a big majority to restore the voting rights of returning citizens or people who had felony convictions. We had a bunch of statewide wins that year. So DeSantis felt like an anomaly in some cases, right? I think our movement and progressives that year felt like we were on the precipice of changing Florida. And I think, Ron DeSantis had a sort of last minute endorsement from Trump, who was the right's darling. And, to some extent, it remains so. But last ditch effort sort of to get DeSantis up into the top. And now he has been able to wreak havoc from the governor's mansion. And we're just, seeing that become increasingly popular. I think it definitely says something about the last, since 2016, really, the shift in this country, I think, across the country in the South to more sort of blatant racism, more blatant attacking of marginalized people. I think DeSantis now, given that he's, barely won in 2018, is really sort of taken advantage of his position to do really reckless and harmful things.
And you want to join that kind of thought?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good summary. I also feel like, we're in this situation where there's an enthusiasm gap between the left and the right in Florida, and you have Democrats that don't really appeal to the base as much as they need to. So Democrats that are, funded by corporate actors, so they're hesitant to champion type of issues we need to secure a strong turnout. And one that sticks out to me is renters' rights, as an example. I represent the city of Orlando and surrounding communities, and we have a pretty large renter population. I'm a renter myself. And championing renters' rights is not only the right thing to do, but it's popular. In Orange County, we actually passed a rent stabilization emergency ordinance with 59% of the vote. And this week in the legislature, a bill just passed that preempts that stabilization ordinance And it included some construction dollars for developers to help boost affordable housing. But at the same time, you take away local control and you boost up corporate incentives. And so all the Democrats, for the most part, voted for it. I think only 5 or 6 of us voted no on it in the House. And so it's hard to appeal to your base, with exciting transformational policy when you're also kind of towing the line of the Republican Party. And I think it makes it more difficult to pitch to people why they should vote Democrat in the first place when you don't offer a strong contrast. And I will say that in my district, we had 11% greater turnout compared to Orange County as a whole. And I feel like that's in large part to just our work ethic and the services we deliver and the relationships that we build with our community. But it also speaks to, the fact that we offer folks not just something to be against, but something to be for. And we champion those working class issues that help rise all boats. Because really the 2022 election cycle in Florida, you can't talk about it unless you acknowledge 2 points. One is the funding gap. There was a funding gap of at least $250 million between the Republicans and Democrats. And then 2, the lack of turnout and, like I said, enthusiasm of Democrats, where we're like 1.5 million people that didn't vote. And so the good news is that it wasn't like there was long lines for DeSantis. There just weren't really any lines for Democrats, right? So we have to really try hard to rebuild that infrastructure. And I really do think focusing on young people is a huge area of importance. This is why I invest so much of my time and energy in supporting the next generation of leaders.
So I'm going to come back to what you just said. I'm going to talk about the future and how you build it and where that struggle is going to go. But let's talk a bit about, for a moment, for many people who are listening to our podcast who are not familiar with what's going on in Florida exactly, and how difficult it is. I mean, everything you read about Florida, from the change in allowing African American studies to be taught in high schools, to the end of any kind of gender discussions in schools, questions about race and racism and the history of Florida, and all that being cut out, and the attack on unions that is taking place, which is fundamental in many ways. So, I mean, let's talk a bit about what you see is going on. I think there's this a great quote I just want to read to you all real fast as we jump into that part of the discussion. But Mayor Ras Baraka of Newark, New Jersey, whose father is the great Amiri Baraka, the writer, whose books have been banned in Florida schools, says, "My initial reaction is the country is being pushed backwards. All the places, the universities, everyone who is fighting for black studies, and to cut out entire people out of history is white supremacy at its best, and it's taking the country backwards." So, and in essence, he's talking about your state. So talk a bit about the situation there politically now, and then let's dive into how we're going to dive into kind of how you resist that and change it. And Anna, I know your time is maybe a little tighter, so I'll let you start, and then Nailah will jump in.
Sure. I mean, I think June Defenders does such amazing work, and I actually partnered recently with Malik here in Tallahassee to host an organizing boot camp with FSU, FAMU, and TCC students in Tallahassee over the weekend. And it was our second boot camp that we've hosted, focused on youth organizing and really trying to empower not just the sense of engagement, but I would take it to the level of efficacy, right? We don't just want people to show up to a protest. We want you to actually get involved in the process, to help organize your community, to help empower your peers to get involved. And a part of that is not just, a reaction, but it's being proactive to building infrastructure and building long-term interest so that you build those muscles for advocacy, regardless of what field you go into. You have with you a understanding that the personal is political and that your voice counts. So we are engaging in, organizing one-on-one trainings, trying to build up that long-term commitment and interest in civics, while also looking towards the legislature as a means to kind of be that canary in the coal mine. Because I'm also just thinking about the fact that DeSantis is running for president, and I need to warn the American people that you do not want that. And here's why. And whether it's attacks on bodily autonomy, like reproductive health and LGBTQ plus lives, whether it's the lack of affordable housing and the property insurance crisis in our state, the effects of climate change with little to no action, alongside the attacks that working class people are facing. As you mentioned, Mark, we have union busting happening right now in Florida. Our governor is anti-worker. People need to know that. So do everything we can to amplify those realities for the rest of the country, so the American people realize that you do not want this guy in the White House.
It really raises the question of when you see the blatant effort to destroy public unions,
Yeah.
and take away union power in Florida and away from public workers. When you see the banning books, I mean, it's like the Nazis banned books.
Yeah, they're playing it by the book. They're playing it by the book. I mean, there is really a concerted effort right now to consolidate power. I mean, it's happening in Florida, but it's happening everywhere. They really want to clearly and rigidly define who gets to have a say in really any portion of their lives. I mean, Florida's about to do a 6-week abortion ban, likely this week.
Oh, a 6-week abortion ban, have you said?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, 6-week abortion ban this week. Yesterday, he signed into law this universal voucher program, which, essentially is the on-ramp to defund public schools, that they've been trying to do in Florida for long before DeSantis became governor. Like you said, the anti-union measures, all of the censorship in schools. I mean, it is a concerted effort to be like, we're taking things from you blatantly. And, right now, the way that the legislature is set up, there's not a whole lot for our legislators to do. And so it's why organizing right now in Florida is as important. It's always important, and everywhere, any era, there's always going to be somebody who's like fighting to take away our rights. But organizing in Florida right now is so important because our options in the legislature are so limited. We have champions like Anna, we have champions like Angie Nixon and Michelle Rayner and a few others. But yeah, organizing and building power outside of that to push back against what we're seeing is just, it's such a dire time to be doing it.
I'd like to jump in here with one thing that Nailah just said, to explore what that means for people listening to us today. When Nailah, when you said the limitations happening in the state legislature of power, and I like Anna to speak to that. And then, what does that mean?
So, I mean, I want to affirm that point, and I think it speaks to the necessary inside outside strategy that we need to win. So, a few amazing colleagues were just mentioned: Representative Michelle Rayner Goolsbee, Representative Angie Nixon, Representative Ashley Gant. I'll throw into the mix as well. These are amazing women and women of color that have been leading the charge and fighting back, but we can't do it alone. And so we really do try to leverage our relationships with organizations on the ground in our communities to raise awareness about legislation and to, again, create as much opposition as possible. One of the worst bills right now, I mean, there's several, so I don't want to rank them because they're all bad.
Mm-hmm.
But House Bill 999 is this omnibus attack on academic freedom, higher education, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and would essentially abolish certain majors and minors, abolish DEI, insert political orthodoxy into general education classes, and abolish tenure. That's a quick synopsis of how extreme this bill is. And we know it's unconstitutional. We're fighting back like our lives depend on it, and the future of Florida depends on it. And that first committee hearing, more than 200 people testified against the bill. And though they were only given 30 seconds to testify, which is a joke, the message was loud and clear, to the point where when the Senate heard their version of the bill, they actually amended it to remove the abolishment of majors and minors. And so we have to keep pushing. And I know sometimes it feels like no one's listening, but you have these little wins when you least expect it. And we do have to celebrate it and continue on, right? And just continue to embrace our everyday folks, build power in a collective way with our communities, and talk to folks. Like I do so much just social media interactions during session because I know that not every person's watching the Florida channel like I am. So I try to take my news junkie self, right, my wonkiness, and I try to break it down to make it more accessible to everyday people. So there is a sense of connection, engagement that will continue beyond legislative session. Because that's what it takes to win. We don't need you to just be active now. Session is a very good organizing opportunity because things are happening in the moment, but we need to sustain that energy over time.
So let's talk a bit about how you and Nailah, you can begin this, and how you begin to organize against that. How do you organize a fight against this massive power of the right that has money coming in from outside, lots of money coming in from outside, from some kind of the most right-wing think tanks in America and organizations in America to back these campaigns, and I talk a bit about what the resistance is and how you organize against it. What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, Dream Defenders has been an organization in Florida for the last 10 years. So we have chapters all over the state. We've got a membership on and off college campuses and communities across the state. And part of what we've been doing is talking to our membership, having community conversations. We, on February 23rd, helped to organize the statewide walkout day against, their students on college campuses. Anna was at FSU and helped, put a lot of this together with a couple other organizations. But we staged a walkout, right? You're raising awareness. You're showing that we're young people, but we're not going to take this laying down, or we're not going to take this quietly. One of the other things that we're looking at is another big sort of national day of action. Coalition right now has been a huge part of how we've been fighting this. There's a ton of organizations in Florida that have been fighting this nationally. You've got like Kimberly Crenshaw and her coalition. You've got a bunch of other organizations nationally that are looking at Florida, wanting to help and are helping us plan these like big days of action. But honestly, it's the relationship building, Anna said, on the ground. That is our movement needs to grow.
So Anna, before you have to run, and you're in the state legislature, and you have organizations like the American Legislative Council, known as ALEC, this very right-wing group, writing legislation that secretly goes to the state legislature and the governor. You've got the Charles Koch's Americans for Prosperity and the State Policy Network from the James Madison Institute, Freedom Foundation. You've got all these national organizations lined up to make Florida a case study in how the right wing takes over America. And that's what you're facing.
That is what we're facing. And we need to have a plan to fight back, right? We need to have not just the Florida plan, but the national plan to fight back. And I do think a part of it is that infrastructure piece and also not being afraid of our base. Republicans are not afraid of their base. And, our base are not insurrectionists. Our base are people that want universal health care, that want corporations to pay their fair share, that want student debt canceled, like economic justice and a fair chance at the American dream. And we shouldn't be afraid of that. We should be helping the success of the American people by listening to our constituents and championing their issues in a meaningful way. And I know I mentioned this earlier, but I do think that it's important to note the role of money in politics. How so many of the most extreme conservative policy proposals are coming from the DeVos family and other places of right-wing think tanks. And so we need to invest in our own idea development, which is the definition of power, right? Power is organized resources, organized people, and organized ideas. So we need to work in a multicultural, multiracial, multigenerational, and a multi-class way to build power across those three variables, and to do it in a way that has a long-term vision. I don't think we're going to flip Florida in a short period of time. I'm thinking it's going to be 8 to 10 years, but it's better to start now than never.
So as you have to leave, Anna, do you both have Do you both have hope? Do you both see a light? Do you see that this could actually happen, that a movement can be built that crosses the lines that Anna was talking about, Nailah, that can actually make this happen?
Absolutely. And, we have a lot of it. Obviously, it needs to grow and needs to get to scale, but we have unions working with, racial and economic justice organizations here in the state of Florida. We've got politicians that are really champions of the folks in Florida. We've got, college campuses and professors. Like, we have the real makings of an extremely powerful movement, and I would never count Florida out. I mean, history also tells us that as bad as Florida's leadership can and has been, people of Florida will never be counted out. Our movements will always succeed. We were just in Tallahassee looking at there are like mile markers of the civil rights movement from the
Yeah.
FAMU,
Yeah.
Massachusetts, right? Like, we know that legacy, we walk in it. And we have relationships with elders. We have Zahara Simmons here, is a SNCC elder from Florida. We've got Charlie Cobb, another Florida,
Yes.
another SNCC elder. So we are connected to movement. We know the legacy that we're walking in. It takes time. It takes time, like Anna said, resources. It takes resources. So we're building the thing. Don't count us out.
I'm not going to do that. Anna, I mean, so you have the same optimism?
Absolutely. I mean, the antidote to despair is action, and there really is nothing good that comes out of experiencing despair, right? Like, we need to build hope. We need to shape our future, and I'm proud to be a Floridian who's committed to that vision, and we're not going anywhere.
That's what I want to hear. I want to thank you both. This is we're going to come back to you, both of you, and into Florida to tell more of this story. And I'm looking forward to hoping to get to Florida, be able to tell the story and bring it back because there's so much that both of you are doing, and it's there's a history in this country of our fighting and fighting back and fighting for. And you mentioned those elders. I guess that'd be me too. It's kind of scary, but it's true. So I really do appreciate you taking the time. We've been here talking to our two great guests here today, with Florida State Representative Anna Eskamani and Nailah Summers-Polite, who is the co-executive director of Dream Defenders Florida. And we will be checking back in with Florida and exploring the struggle in many other states as we cover the rise of the right, and as importantly, if not more importantly, the resistance to it and the fight for the future. So I want to thank both of you for being with us today. It's been a pleasure to have you on the air.
Thanks so much. Appreciate
Thanks so much.
And I will be harassing y'all. This will not be the last time you join us. We're going to continue to look at Florida. Thank you both so much.
Got an invitation. Come on, we'll host you.
Cool. I'm there. Thank you both so much.
Alrighty, take care.
So I hope you all enjoyed our conversation today with Florida State Representative Anna Eskamani and Nailah Summers-Polite, co-executive director of Dream Defenders Florida. And we'll be checking back in with Florida and exploring the struggle in many other states as we cover the rise of the right and the resistance rising against it as we fight for our future. And thank you all for joining us today. Please let me know what you thought about the conversation you heard today, what you'd like us to cover. Just write to me at mss@therealnews.com, and I'll write you right back. And while you're there, go on over to www.therealnews.com/support, become a monthly donor, and become part of the future with us. So for Cameron Grandino, David Hebden, and Kayla Rivara, and the crew here at The Real News, I'm Marc Steiner. Stay involved, keep listening, and take care.
Thank you so much for watching The Real News Network, where we lift up the voices, stories, and struggles that you care about most. And we need your help to keep doing this work, so please tap your screen now, subscribe, and donate to The Real News Network. Solidarity forever.